Hello there, and welcome to day 36 of A Film A Day with me, Jordan Woodley. And today I am delving back into classic cinema with the Francis Ford Coppola 1974 film, The Conversation. So this lies slap bang in the middle between The Godfather and Apocalypse Now. I wish I could say that having seen all three, I can see the narrative track of how one leads to the other, and how Coppola went from The Godfather by just telling a narrative to hyper-focusing in on a one man's experience with The Conversation and the paranoia and the psychosis that it was developing into Apocalypse Now, which almost explodes that idea of paranoia to the point where one man's delusions becomes a cultish phenomenon. Even though I've just made that point, unfortunately, I still think you could switch the orders and make any connection between them. I think Coppola was in a very specific point in his mind with those three films, and it was the era of that kind of filmmaking, the idea of paranoia, the idea of the introduction of the non-happy ending in Hollywood cinema, and the fact that we could tell these crushing, tragic, heavy stories where you can leave without really knowing what the moral is. So The Conversation follows Gene Hackman, who is a what's the best way to call it? A surveillance operator. This is quite interesting for me in terms of learning about such things, is that surveillance operators can be working for an organisation or can be freelance, and their sole function is to get the best quality recording. What they then do with that recording, they normally do it on behalf of a client, and what that client does with that recording is entirely their business, as opposed to what you would imagine, which is someone doing the surveillance and then going through the material and working out what's what. Their sole function is to just get the best possible recordings of conversations that they can. And so what you find is that Gene Hackman is the best. He is he is your narratively archetypical, this guy does bugging better than no one else. But what you also find is that he is plagued with a tragic backstory, where because of his ability to to get audio surveillance on someone, very unfortunate consequences plague him, and he feels the responsibility of something that he didn't necessarily do himself, but he contributed to the deaths of third parties. This is definitely a film that I would count as important, interesting, and informative, both in if you are a fan of Francis Ford Coppola, or if you are interested in the history of film, especially of that period. But this is not a fun watch. Now, I'm going to qualify what I mean by that. A film doesn't have to be, a Disney film to be a fun watch. There are films that are grand watches that by the time you get to the end, you think, this really, was an intense experience, but I enjoyed it. If you look at, I love Apocalypse Now. Apocalypse Now is a film that I think is a masterpiece, and I would watch it 100 times over. However, it's not fun. It's not a fun sit because it's very heavy, but it is a intensive, visceral experience. But when I use the term fun in this context, Apocalypse Now is fun, as in it is engaging. The conversation I found incredibly hard to sit through. It's a very slow burning film, but then traditionally Coppola's films are slow burning. But even in that context, it is an incredibly slow film. It takes about the halfway point until I really was engaged with Harry Call, which is Gene Hackman's character, and where he's at and his emotional state, and why I should care about this person who does this really rather miserable job. It's known in Coppola's back catalogue that what he likes to do is to create a realistic representation, or without a representation of an experience without the glamour. So with The Godfather, he doesn't portray the mafia as cool or this interesting organisation. They are interesting, but it is incredibly intensive, and it's something that by the end of the film you think I would not want to be in the mafia if you thought that beforehand. Apocalypse Now, similarly, he doesn't want to make a war film which people engage with and they think, soldiers are our heroes. He wants to make a intensive psychological experience that makes someone go, oh, I would never have wanted to be in the Vietnam War, and frankly, I come away thinking, I don't think I'd ever want to have been a soldier. The conversation removes any sense of cool from surveillance. It's not like Spooks. It's not like Homeland, where you think that these people are very clever and cool, and it's all rather exciting. It actually shows how mundane the art of being a surveillance operator is, how obsessive you have to be, and how isolating it is. Frankly, Gene Hackman is the only character you even attach to or spend any length of time with in this film. He has relationships with people, but he is for the most part isolated, and you are isolated with him. And so as the paranoia sets in, and as he starts to really lose it, you can kind of see where he's at, and you can think, I can see why someone who would do this mind-numbing of a job would break like this, because it's a grueling kind of experience. But as I say, I didn't enjoy it. I intellectually appreciated it, but I didn't enjoy it. I do think by the time you get to the third act, it starts to really unpack some interesting ideas. At that stage, Harry Call is really starting to unwind his mind, and so you get these moments of delusion isn't the correct word, but it's the camera portrays it as you would someone who's losing their mind a little bit. Especially when he is the witness to something that he doesn't fully comprehend, and you really start to see him unravel psychologically, and that is interesting. You get almost a horror-inflected take from it at certain points. There's a dream sequence that I possibly think might be the best sequence in the film that really makes a good horror film moment in this thriller. But it's a long sit to get there, and I can't say that it was... it's not one that I would cherish or want to go back to. To finish off with, I just wanted to talk about Claudia Goldman. My fiancée Helen, many years ago, did an essay exploring the conversation from the context of Claudia Goldman's writing on the 7 principles of sound. Now, traditionally, that was for classical music. However, in this essay, she looked at how it's applied to sound design. And I think sound design in this film is fundamental. That this film is very much about the importance of what you are hearing as much as the importance of what you're seeing. And if there is ever a film that advertises a sense of, oh, the audio experience of the cinema is as important as the visual, it is a film like this. And I wanted to give that nod to that as someone who is very invested in audio production. The sound design on this and the focus on sound and the different kinds of sound and the different ways that recordings are done is important. Similarly, I would also give a nod to editing. I do think there are interesting ideas here, like the use of editing and playback and the idea of playing the same conversation over and over again, and from the audience's perspective, seeing it played slightly differently and seeing it played the same several times over but with a different understanding. And I think that is the stroke of a master, as Coppola is, and as the people who are around him were as well. And so the importance of the editing, the importance of the sound design, I think construction-wise this film is very important. But as I say, intellectually, I think I really found a lot in it. Emotionally, not so much. But yeah, thank you again for joining me. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.